In this video, we will be talking about God's providence, from the definitions set by theologians as well as the Bible, then the important concept, as well as the personal and professional implications. Now, let's get right into it. First things first, let us see the definition of God's providence. Now, when we are talking about God's providence, there are a few things that we need to take note of. Firstly, Berkhoff defined God's providence as that continued exercise of divine energy whereby the Creator preserves all of His creations, and it is operative in all that comes to pass by in this world and directs all things towards their appointed end. Similarly, Bavinck defined God's providence as a source of consolation and hope, trust and courage, as well as humility and resignation. This actively contradicts the idea of God being a distant creator towards His creations. In fact, it is the opposite. Bavinck specifically emphasizes God's active governance and care over His creations, no matter how big or how small, no matter how we think is insignificant or significant. Providence is not merely the foreknowledge, but also involves God's active will ruling all things and includes preservation, concurrence, and government. This translates to how God not only sustains all life under His watchful eyes, but also works to fulfill His divine purposes, ensuring that nothing will ever occur outside of His will. In the Bible, it is also said in Genesis 50 verse 20, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive, as they are today." Within this word, it directly states that even if humanity means to harm, God's sovereignty and plan will prevail for the greater good. He will always protect us and His chosen people.
And now we're focusing on the three important concepts. The first one is preservation. Have you ever wondered how the world keeps moving? Well, the Bible tells us in Hebrew chapter 1 verse 3 that He upholds the universe by the word of His power. This means that in every moment, God is preserving His creation actively. Reformed dogmatics explain it like this: nothing exists, no power, no ideas, no life unless it entirely comes from God, sustained by God, and exists just for God. Preservation isn't just about keeping things alive. It's about God ensuring everything continues for His purpose and glory.
So the second concept is concurrence. As Berkhoff said in Systematic Theology book, that concurrence may be defined as the cooperation of the divine power with all subordinate powers according to the pre-established law of their operations, causing them to act and to act precisely as they do. So it describes that God cooperates with all His creation in their actions.
And the third is government. In this sense, a government describes the other two as guiding all things in such a way that the final goal determined by God will be reached. God directs everything towards His ultimate purpose, governing over every action and every thought to align towards His will. God's governance ensures that all actions unfold according to His will. In the Bible, Psalm 103 verse 19 says, "The Lord has established His throne in the heavens, and His kingdom rules over all." This verse reaffirms that nothing occurs outside of God's will and jurisdiction, as well as sovereign control.
And now we will moving on to personal implication. Life doesn't always go as planned, sometimes we face challenges, uncertainty, or even moments where everything seems out of control. But you know what? Here's the good news. God's providence means He is in control of everything, even the tough times. Romans chapter 8 verse 28 says that we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, and those who are called according to His purpose. This verse reminds us that nothing is random. Everything serves a purpose in His plan.
So here we arrive at the last part of the video, that we have the professional implication, especially for the Christian teacher. So what can we take about this theme of providence, God's providence? So first, we have to handing over the planning of the class we teach to God. You know, every human action cannot be separate from God's will and power. We must realize that we're only enabled by God, and we must surrender the entire planning of our teaching and learning activities to God. So, let's take a look in the Bible. So in James chapter 4, verse 13 and 14 says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanish." And this said that we cannot make a plan without take God into the plan. So Berkov said in the Systematic Theology book that God works by empowering man to determine his actions and sustain his activities. The teacher should pray that God will enable them to teach according to God's will, just as God was with Moses when he spoke. We can see in Exodus chapter 4, verse 11 and 12. This said, "Then the Lord said to him, Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf, or seeing or blind? It is not I, the Lord. Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak." So from this chapter, these verses, that we can see that Moses can speak is by God's power. As we teacher, we can teach by all the students only with God that enable us to teach and speak. And the second point, we should always look at students with optimism that God is working in their lives. In planning the classroom, we may experience things that do not want, even though we have planned many things and worked them wholeheartedly. It might happen that the students we have taught well and attentively do not develop as we wanted, but we must remain optimistic and accept it well. We should look like Christ, who had positive attitude even towards those who seem hopeless. So we must believe that God is still working in their life, of every students, as we can see in the Bible at Romans chapter 8, verse 28. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to His purpose. So we can see that God is work all in every human, and also in every students that we teach. And Berkov also said that the powers of nature do not work by themselves. It's simply by God works within every act of creature. And this shows that God works within each student in every act of learning in classrooms.